Welcome to the Best Music Podcast, where we see behind the curtain to discover the hidden habits and success secrets of noteworthy music makers. I'm your host, Dan Spencer, and this week's featured guest is Jimmy Ryan. Now, Jimmy Ryan is a composer, producer, arranger, and author. His career has spanned 63 years and is still going strong, having recently performed at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 2022 induction ceremony with triple Grammy winner Olivia Rodrigo to inaugurate his longtime friend and former bandmate Carly Simon. His college band, The Critters, had their first top 40 hit, Younger Girl, and landed 3 charting albums and 2 more top 40 hits, Mr. Dieingly Sad and Don't Let the Rain Fall Down on Me. Jimmy played on Carly Simon's Anticipation album and went on to work on most of Carly's future albums and continues to work with her to this day. He was the guitar soloist on almost all of Carly's hits, and most memorable being You're So Vain and the Academy Award-winning Song of the Year from the movie Working Girl, Let the River Run. On Carly Simon sessions, he has recorded, collaborated with major artists including, brace yourselves people, because here we go, Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, Luther Vandross, James Taylor, and many more, earning him, count them, 7 RIAA Certified Platinum Records, and I noticed a couple gold records behind you as well there, so we're not counting us.
They don't give you these things. You have to buy them. And, all of these have gone platinum since I bought the gold.
Oh, well, see, there you go.
Yeah.
Now, in addition to...
The record company gives them to the artist, but for the support people like me, we gotta write a check.
You gotta shell out and pay for shipping. Well, in addition to all those platinum records, Jimmy has also recorded with numerous artists, including Cat Stevens, John Entwistle of The Who, Elton John and Kiki Dee, Tommy James, Jimmy Webb, The Doors, Andy Williams, Martha Reeves, and Rod Stewart. Jimmy also played guitar on Andy Williams' #1 hit, Solitaire. Jimmy created the theme for NBC News that ran nationwide from 2003 to 2009 on many local NBC stations. In 2005, he wrote the themes and background music for all these CNBC financial shows that aired on 6 continents worldwide, many of which are still running to this day. Jimmy also scored the nationwide launch campaign for the channel MSNBC, and in 2020, Jimmy composed the music for The News with Shepard Smith on CNBC. Jimmy has also written music for the Discovery Channel, Lifetime, USA Network, and PBS, scoring the Nova Movie of the Year, The Pluto Files with Neil deGrasse Tyson. In collaboration with the History Channel, he composed music for major exhibitions at the Smithsonian Institution. Jimmy has also composed, arranged, and produced music for over 500 radio and TV commercials for clients including Doritos, McDonald's, IBM, Ford, Nikon, Pizza Hut, Budweiser, Chevy, Menon, Palmolive, Hess, Hasbro, Downy, Clearasil, Arby's, Coke, Diet Coke, Models, and more. Jimmy's latest project, a memoir called Behind, Autobiography of a Musical Shapeshifter, is available worldwide and at all major booksellers. See links in the video description of this video or in the show notes if you are on audio to grab a copy of this tell-all memoir. And may I selfishly say that my favorite jingle of all time, Jimmy wrote, that I grew up my childhood absolutely loving, which was a Models jingle. So thank you for that, Jimmy, on behalf of my 9-year-old self, who would sing along with that every single time it came on the radio.
There go the moves.
Amazing. So, Jimmy, my first question for you is, do you think there's a difference between crafting a song and crafting a hit? And if so, what is that difference?
Big difference. I'm actually doing a show right now. I've put together a one-man show, mainly to sell the book, but because the book is behind, which means behind the people that I worked with. I worked with Carly Simon. I am obviously not Carly Simon. I worked with Rod Stewart. I worked with all these people, but behind that, as a studio musician, as a backup musician on stage, when you write a song, most people just kind of, they're general. They play the chords, they spend a lot of time in the lyrics if they're smart, and they write a melody. But when you go into the studio, you bring it to guys like me. I call us the musical hair and makeup guys. You come in without, you get the shampoo, you get the makeup, the whole thing. We come up with lines, introductory phrases. Maybe we'll change a chord or two. Maybe we'll help the arrangement. Sometimes we change things from straight time da 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 to a swing da 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 da. That's helpful. Anything we can do to spiff it up and give it a spit shine so that when it comes out the other side, hopefully it's a hit. So the big difference is a songwriter generally writes a song, a hit maker makes it a hit, and there's a big difference. I mean, if you listen to some of Billie Eilish's songs, what is her brother's name? Not Hamish.
Phineas. Phineas is a genius. I mean, what he does with his computer to their songs, if she just sings her songs, yeah, they're good songs, but then, I'm a bad guy, and all that, go get it. That's the production value. That's not the song. The song is just the words and music, the words and melody. So, yeah, big difference. Hopefully. Hopefully. Anyway, I do a show, and I do just that. I introduce the book and tell people what studio musicians do. And I sit there with a guitar, and I take a bunch of songs that people know, and I start off with how the song came into the studio, even Beatles songs, because I worked with Paul, and I met Ringo and George and all these people, and I have a pretty good idea how they do things. And if you watch Let It Be, you get a beautiful idea of how they do things. It just comes out and they throw it out. So I sit there and I take the song, just as I said, just the chords and music, and I said, you play these songs without the production. Every breath you take, if you just play the chords for that song, it's nothing. But you get Andy Summers, now all of a sudden it's what Sting said. It's a hideous song. I mean, it's beautiful, but it's a song about a stalker. So... yeah, so I do this show, and then in the end I read from the book, and then I go sign copies if people want them. But yeah, that's the difference. That's the long answer to the short question. And in your mind, because you've done so much work for scoring things, what do you think is the main thing it takes to make a jingle that is going to stick, not just for your musical sensibilities, but also for the suits that are going to have to sign off at the executives who are going to have to say, yes, this is good?
That's a really good question, because all of us that worked in that industry, and I kind of stopped working in 1998. I just couldn't do it anymore.
Why couldn't you do it anymore? Add that on to the end of the answer, please.
Well, all right. So the beginning part of the answer is I have no idea. You just write what you think will work, and somebody's going to get it right. It is such an unbelievable crapshoot. Most of the people that are directing these things are people out of college who think they're Steven Spielberg, and they come in with the wackiest instructions. I had one situation where a guy said, I want it, to be like, the Monty Python theme? So we gave him that. He says, what the hell is this? I said, you said you wanted it like the Monty Python theme. He says, no, I just meant fun. I didn't mean an oompa band. So it's very often that they cannot articulate what's going on in their head because they're not musicians. Every now and then you'll get a musical director at an ad agency. There was one at Gray Advertising. It was wonderful. He was a great keyboard player, and his instructions were so specific. It was easy to write exactly what he wanted. But he's like one in a million. And so often you just get these vague instructions. Well, what are you looking for? He said, well, I'll know it when I hear it. What are you supposed to do with that? So that's part of the reason I got out of it. I just got so sick. Well, the other reason is they just don't want to pay you anything. Everybody is a hero that cuts the cost more and more and more. So commercials that were paying creative fees of like $10,000, $15,000, were now paying $500. And the competition, they would have 30 people competing and no demo fees. Well, if you get this, it could be really good for your resume. Yeah, it won't be really good for paying my rent, though. So I just got sick. I wouldn't call it corruption. I would just call it greed. And not even greed, just trying to be a hero and save the agency money, save the client money. Thank God for unions, because they could never do that with the singers and the musicians, because we're union members, and the union won't let them. So there's fixed fees for residuals, there's fixed fees, but that has nothing to do with your creative fees or your time or, your writing time. So, yeah, I just hated the business, so I just got out of it.
You hinted at it, and I think people would be interested to know, could you talk a little bit about what happens when you get that sort of cattle call essentially from an ad agency, and it goes out and you have 30, 40, 50 different people all submitting ideas for the same ad, and what that feels like on the end of someone who's submitting for it.
I have never submitted to anything that had that many. I've done, I don't know as they do that now because I've been out of that business for a while, but I've had as many as 15. And when the number gets beyond like 6 or 7, I pass. I just, it's just not worth it because you can't, because we can, you know, this is where the computer has shot us in the foot, because we can create the entire piece of music to sound like it's a record ready for on the air for Spotify or whatever. You're expected to do that. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. It's not quicker than going in the studio with a bunch of musicians. It's a lot longer because you're playing all the instruments. Oh, that's the other thing. You're expected to be able to play all the instruments because you're not given a budget to hire a drummer or a keyboard player or whatever. So when there's that many people, it's just a crapshoot. You just throw the dice and hope it comes up, you know, ones or whatever the thing is. Now, that's the reason I switched over to working directly with TV stations and film companies, because they choose a composer. It's not a competition. They look at reels, they look at who is appropriate for that job, they call them, and then I don't mind redoing it, revising it over and over because I've got the job. In the end, I will be the guy. So, and of course it's got to be right. Of course you're going to have to do revisions. That's what the word I was looking for. It's never going to be perfect. Well, it's rarely going to be perfect first time out, but that's fine because I've got the job. I'm going to get that paycheck, so why not do the work and make these people happy? And if you make them happy, they call you over and over and over again because you're the guy that listens to them and you're the guy that doesn't mind working a little harder. I've had a relationship with one guy, the guy who did all the NBC and CNBC stuff, where I met him in 1998, and we've been working together almost exclusively ever since. Because I love the guy. He's great. He's smart. He's a musician himself. He gives me very clear instructions, and I give him what the station needs. So I think that answers your question.
It does. It does 100%. I was talking to a friend of mine who is, they now do things with the ads where it's like you'll get almost like submission libraries, these websites that are just submission library, and it's like, and you go and you create like you say, and you have to sit down, and if you don't play all the instruments, you still need to program the instruments. And even if you're using like machine learning drummers and things like that, the amount of time to sit there and mix it and master it and get the sounds right and do the custom arrangements, and like it's so time consuming. But yeah, they were talking about this library, and a music manager just goes in and types dark, sorrowful, and all of a sudden they have like 200 options.
Yep. Music, it's become music by the pound.
Yeah.
And it's dead cheap. Some of these libraries will just let you take the music and just register it with ASCAP or BMI, and they'll just live off the royalties. Wow. They don't even charge you an upfront fee. And as a custom composer, I can't compete with that. Yeah. I don't want to compete with that.
No, do something else, right?
And some of the music is pretty good. It's gotten a lot better over the years. And with some libraries, they will actually hire musicians for you to create really good orchestral sounding libraries. You know, they'll upfront the cost, and then when the money comes in, you know, they take a pretty decent sized cut out of it. You know, you get a little, but you're in there with 100 other writers. You know, and like you said, dark, sorrowful, whatever. So if you've written something, that'll come up in the search. And if you're lucky, they'll pick your piece and then be on a big national network commercial or be inserted in a TV Netflix film. Or generally, that doesn't happen. Films really want good quality, so they license records, you know, by major artists. That's a good thing.
Do you have any thoughts on the AIs that are out there now, composing jingles, composing music?
I'm not aware that any have composed anything that's made it onto the air. What I'm learning about AI is nothing more than a really, really clever database. Basically what AI does is they just scan the web, and just log everything. And it's curated by humans. I found out that what is it, Chat GPT, is that what it is? Yeah. A lot of times your requests are carefully curated because, people start asking medical questions and they're getting really bad answers back because the Chat GPT it kind of thinks it knows what's in, but there's no heart, there's no human. Like, no, wait, that doesn't make sense.
So you're asking, I have a headache, what should I do? And it goes, take a snail, put it on your ear for 3 days.
Exactly. Yeah, it can. It's not usually that bad, but somebody brought up a couple of things on a forum that I'm on. I'm like, oh boy, whoo, look out there. Is it as good as Google? It's getting there. It's getting there. The big problem, I think, is now kids are going to start using it in educational systems to write term papers. They had ChatGPT take the bar exam. I'm not sure that it passed, but I think it did really well. And that's writing music. Oh God, music is so vast and so good music is so heart-based. I think it will probably be mechanical for a long time until they figure out how to program emotions. They haven't. That is not here yet.
Yeah.
It's just data that it's programming.
Yeah, you talked about that in your book, having a moment where you stepped up to a mic and you were pitch perfect in a performance. This was in the very early days, like when you were first getting started. You stepped up to the mic, you gave a pitch perfect vocal performance, but there was zero emotion to it. And the guy at the control booth was like, can you do that again, but with something, please?
Yeah, right. I was like, what are you talking about? It was perfect. That was my younger days. I've learned since.
Yes, indeed. Jimmy, could you talk a little bit about mindfulness and meditation and how you feel that impacts performance and creativity?
Whew, that's a big subject. Well, I've been a meditator for 40... I learned to meditate in 1994, and I'm horrible at math, so I guess that's 48 years. It impacts everything. It impacts everything. What it does is it silently, in the background, unplugs trauma. It takes time. It doesn't happen like in a day, because trauma for kids can go in over many, many years, and it's not going to come out in 20 minutes of meditation. But anything that gets you closer to your true self, not the programmed self, not the conditioned self from your childhood, anything that gets you closer to that is going to make you a better performer. Because, let's face it, the people who really get to you are people who are absolutely locked into their hearts. People like Aretha Franklin. She opens her mouth and you just go, oh my God. She's not faking it. That's not data you're listening to. You're listening to her heart. People like Tchaikovsky back in the day, you can't write stuff like that if you haven't got some really good emotional connection with reality. So mindfulness, I think of mindfulness as something that's outside of meditation. That's just staying in the present moment, not walking around daydreaming. And by that I just mean when you focus on something, be with that something. Don't be typing a letter to somebody and thinking what you're going to have for lunch. That's non-mindfulness. So that's a quality that's very, very useful in doing a good job. Meditation is quite another thing, because meditation, you're just centering on nothing. That's the idea. You just, a really easy way to do it is just close your eyes, just relax for a second, just focus on your breathing down in your belly, not up here, down in your belly. And just simply focusing on that just starts to slow everything down. When you're scared, people say, breathe, breathe. Well, in meditation, you can do that to a much quieter degree. And what you find is there's something behind all of your thoughts. There's an observer there, the you. When you say me, what are you? Well, I'm a musician. No, you're not. There was a time when you weren't a musician. Were you not you when you weren't a musician? No, you were still you. And now I'm a husband and I'm a father, and but that's not me. There's something behind that that's looking at all of that, and that's the real you. And the more you get in touch with that, the more you're going to be able to navigate your way through everything. because you're not looking through all this dense fog of nonsense that's been programmed into your brain since the day you were born. I mean, you're never going to get rid of all of that. But it's nice to be able to part the fog every now and then. The more you meditate, the more that fog kind of clears up and you can see through it. So,
Jimmy, do you think of yourself as a musician, as a person, a human who plays music, or something else?
I can't say I've ever thought about that. So let me think about that. Ask me the question again so I understand?
Yeah, do you think of yourself as a musician, your identity? Are you a musician? Are you a human who sometimes plays and creates music? Or is it something else?
B. I'm going with B.
Yeah.
Choice B. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's such a thing as a musician. I think there's a role that's a musician.
But people get conflated in their minds, and they define themselves as being musicians. I'm sure you've met people who do that.
Oh, of course, and that's what I was talking about before. If you can locate this true self behind all that, you'll see that at some point you weren't a musician. So, are you a musician? Well, then you weren't a musician, and it can't be true or real if it's not always real. If it's changing, then it's not the real thing. And identities can change. Sure, I'm a tax collector. I'm a secretary. I'm a garbage man. I'm a musician, but I am a musician. I work as a musician. That's my job. That's what I do. And I have all these jobs and these roles I do. Yeah.
Well, speaking of all these incredible jobs and all these roles you've filled, how do you define success for yourself?
For me, to some degree, it's about money. So, to some degree, making money. That's very important. I have a highly educated background. Not me personally. I'm the dropout in the family, but my dad went to MIT. My mom got her master's from Fordham. My brothers and sisters all have college degrees. I come from a high amount of education. Give me the question one more time, because I think I'm sort of drifting here.
How do you define success for yourself?
Success, right. I think you're successful if you're happy.
What makes you happy?
Well, it depends. I mean, a whole bunch of things.
Sure, in music. What makes you happy? I mean,
if you're looking stuff from the outside, just anything where a creative endeavor that I do is appreciated. If it's appreciated, if people like it, if they buy it, if they enjoy it. I like being busy. I'm not good kind of sitting around the house and, I think I'll wash the dishes now. And, I will do my domestic duties, but I have to have a creative project going. I'm 76 now. And I'm still working. I'm still touring, and I'm still making music, and I just love it. And I'm going to go. If I die with a guitar in my hand, I'll be very happy. My wife might not be so happy, but I'll be sad.
I was going to say, whoever's in the audience might not be thrilled, but at least you go out the way you want to go. Jimmy, what's your number one piece of advice for people around achieving goals in music?
Oh boy. That's a hard one. These are really good questions. The things that I haven't thought about at all. I don't want to give you like a pat answer, like be true to yourself. Never sell out. I don't know what I'd tell you, because I've made a bunch of mistakes. You have to make compromises if you want to survive. When I got into jingles, my studio career. Disco was coming in, and it was going okay, but it's a labor job. It's a labor job where you get paid by the hour, and I wasn't really getting anywhere. I lived in England for a while, and a session, a recording session over there, paid somewhere in the area in the 70s, $25 for a 3-hour session. And you can do a lot of sessions and still not be making an awful lot of money. So I moved back to the United States, where it was like 10 times that much. And that was good, But you got to be working all the time, 8 hours a day, to make a really good living. And then I discovered, then I took a little bite of the dark side of the force and wrote my first jingle, and the money just came pouring in. And I was like, huh. And I was barely paying my rent. I wasn't able to eat out. There was that period where I was really hungry. And I considered that a big success, because it's really hard to be happy when you're poor. When you're struggling to pay the rent, when you're struggling to put meal on the table, if you've got kids and, you can't get them clothes, you got to make some compromises. You don't want to sell your soul to the devil, if there's such a thing. You don't want to do that to the point where you're doing something you really hate, if you can avoid it. But sometimes you got to do things that you don't like as much as you would like to like, in order to survive. So, be as true as you can to yourself. Don't sell out. Don't do things that are really bad and bad for you just because they're a lot of money. I mean, I ran into that with cigarette commercials. I don't smoke. I did at one time, and when I did smoke, I was happy to do cigarette commercials. But then I got asked afterwards, and I lost an agency contact because I said, I can't do cigarette commercials. Now, I could have made a boatload of money doing this. This was when this was for Europe, because cigarettes have been illegal to advertise for years here, but in Europe they at least at the time they were still legal, and it was a big campaign all over Europe. And I can't do that. I can't, with what I know and with people I know who have had lung cancer. I can't go out there and say, do this. This is great. I can't do it. So I had to sacrifice a lot of money for it, but I went to bed with a clear conscience, and that's very important. I don't know. Beyond that, advice, the be true to yourself just sounds so stock.
But that's essentially what you have just said, is to be true to yourself, essentially.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't compromise what you know is right for money. Because in the end, it's going to bite you in the ass. It just will. It just will. In the end, you're not going to feel good about yourself. Do stuff that makes you feel good about yourself. There you go. Do stuff that makes you feel good.
What's your number one lesson or the number one mistake that you made along the way?
Oh, that's easy.
When it comes to achieving your goals?
Yeah. Well, when it comes to achieving my goals is one side of it, but the number one mistake I made was arrogance. When I started getting really good at what I did and being involved in big hits, I got a little cocky. And, sometimes I would pull attitude in the studio when I thought I knew better than the producer. And every time that happened, I lost a contact. The deal is, when you're a hired gun, that's what you are. You're there to perform a function for somebody. And it's fine to voice your opinion, but voice it respectfully. And if somebody asks you to do something that you know isn't going to work, the response is, yeah, let's try that. Because they'll find out pretty quick that it doesn't work. And you're the good guy because you did what they wanted to do. What I did was, oh man, that's not going to work. What are you talking about? No, don't do that. That's not your job. So be very careful of your ego. Be very careful of arrogance. That's, I mentioned in my book that there's a lot of people out there, people that I know, they're fantastic players, but for some reason they can't get out from behind the guitar store counter because their personality is abrasive. It isn't the kind. I think it may have been Leland Sklar or one of the good LA musicians said to me, you know what? To really make it in the studio business, you want to be somebody that they want to hang out with. It's not just what you're playing. You guys are going to be going out to dinner together. You're going to be working late into the night, and they want somebody there that's like their best friend, somebody that go have a drink with, something like that. And in order to do that, you got to put your ego away. You got to be a helping hand. It doesn't mean you suck up to people. You don't want to do that either, because that's pretty obvious. You just want to be cooperative, and you want to be there to assist them in achieving their goal. That's the role of a studio musician. So watch that ego.
What's your number one?
And I just want to add one thing to that. I learned that the hard way. You know, I was the guy that, oh, what a jerk. I was plenty jerk in my day, and you know, fortunately, I learned fairly early on how well that works, and not with really important people to my career. So, yeah.
What's your number one piece of advice for practicing?
Do it long and hard.
What's your number one mistake that you learned to avoid with practicing?
Procrastination, boredom. What I know about practicing is if there's a phrase that you want to learn, don't just keep blowing through it. Practice it slowly, one note at a time, until don't play it any faster than you can play it perfectly. And that could be da ba dum ba da. Then you do it 5 times without a mistake, and you just bump the tempo up slightly, and do it again 5 more times. And if you make a mistake, stop and go back to the beginning. That starts the clock again. And if you do that, you'll get really, really good. If you practice just and make the same mistakes over and over again, what you're doing is you're printing those mistakes. If you let them go, the brain says, okay, that's what you wanted to do. And every time you go over, that same mistake is going to be there. There was I did an exercise of trying to learn the solo in Crossroads, Cream's Crossroads. And there's one lick in there that, and I just couldn't freaking do it because I always tried to do it at tempo. And I kept flubbing it. And then I got this advice from a guitar teacher. He says, well, the reason you're flubbing it is you keep trying to do it at the wrong speed and you're printing the mistake that you're making. So I just started dun da 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 da. And eventually I got it. Now I can play it at speed, nice and clean. And if you go to my TikTok, I actually did a cover of Crossroads doing that solo just for the hell of it. You should check it out. It's really funny. It's me on the back of a train. You'll see it.
Okay, fantastic. The one piece I would add to that is that as you are increasing your tempo, when you get to the point where you are making mistakes, you're no longer qualifying at the bar of playing it perfectly. Therefore, the next action should be to reduce tempo and slow back down. And that would just bring us full circle.
Yep. Yeah, you're only allowed to play the tempo that you can do it perfectly.
Yeah.
If you can't do it perfectly, then you got to back it down a little bit, just like you said. Yeah.
Jimmy, do you ever take any steps to protect your creative space, either mindset or physical creative space?
Physical or mental?
Both.
Well, I guess that's the question, isn't
both.
it? Physical or mental? In as much as I can. My kids are grown up now, so that's that's a big deal. Because when they were growing, I really had to put time aside, and eventually it cost me my marriage because I didn't put enough of time aside. You want a space. You want a private space where you can close doors that's kind of soundproof, where you're not afraid to sing louder than you would if people were listening when you're doing vocal warm-ups. I do vocal warm-ups that are just, they scare the cats away. You just to shoot your upper range up, and so I have a space here that's the computer and the speakers and all my guitars and all that, and it's soundproofed and it's a good space. So you need it's good to have that space. If you don't have that space, it's going to be tough. If you're in a 1-bedroom apartment. I was living with this woman. She was working a regular job, and I was in my studio, and I was learning a lick from a Marvin Gaye song. I don't know what it was. She came home, and I go, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm playing like she's, "Oh my God! If I hear that lick one more time, I'm going to lose my mind." and that was it. I had to stop practicing because I didn't have that private space, and I certainly didn't want to drive her nuts. But I was doing exactly what you said. I'm practicing it slowly, a little bit faster, so I can get the rhythm right. And so a good dedicated space is really helpful.
What's your number one piece of advice for, as much as one can, developing and deepening creativity?
Here's the thing. A lot of it is your conditioning. They find, I believe, and you can stop me if I'm wrong, they find that if they really encourage young kids to be creative, they will be creative. But, I mean, there are people, my ex-wife, for instance, she comes from a family of lawyers. And a family of lawyers believes there is no future in entertainment unless you're their lawyer. And then there's a big future in it. So as a result, she had fantastic musical taste, but she couldn't play anything, she couldn't sing anything, or had great difficulty doing it, because she was so programmed to not be creative. Don't mess with this. Now me, I had a mixed bag. As I said, I came from a pretty well-educated family, but my mom and dad were both musicians. And they did it just for pleasure, but they were good musicians. My dad had a real good Irish tenor. My mom was a pretty good keyboard player. So they really encouraged me to play my music, but they also encouraged me to do my studies. I kind of listened to the first part and not so much to the second. I was always kind of a C student. It wasn't that I was smart, it was that I wasn't interested or wasn't smart. So, again, back to where were we going with this? You got to stop me because I can talk.
Advice for deepening and developing creativity. You were talking about how a lot of it's mindset. It's how you think. It's how you allow yourself to think.
Yeah, but so much of how you allow yourself to think is your conditioning. As I just said, if you're told from the very, very beginning, oh, don't even think about playing violin or anything like that. Yeah, maybe you play it in the school orchestra, but you put it away when you go to college. If you're getting that message all the time, you will get a mindset that you're not going to be creative. You're just going to do your job or whatever it is. I think meditation is very useful for that, because meditation can unplug a whole lot of conditioning, and it can open up a channel to your creativity. Once again, it's just that fog in your brain of all this stuff going on, that when you quiet all that down, you can back up into the true self and find your creative urges and work with them.
What's the number one mistake you've learned to avoid and for anyone listening on audio, I'm doing massive air quotes, being creative?
And what was the first part? I got lost.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was tossing in some qualifiers. That's a big air bunny quotes. What's the number one mistake you learned to avoid in trying to be creative?
The mistake I've learned to avoid. Procrastination and insecurity are the biggest killers. If you may be good, but even the best creative people have blocks. And if you hit one of those blocks and you hit it hard, it's a little tougher to start up again the next day. So you procrastinate instead of just sitting down and powering through it. So watch out for procrastination. Blocks are going to come. You're not always going to be, I saw a great interview with Bob Dylan the other day. I don't know when he did this interview, but it was with CBS, one of the anchors at CBS. And the anchor said, "What's going on with your creativity? You're writing and stuff like that." And Bob said, that was another me. He said, that day's come and gone. He says, I don't know where those songs came from. He said, I would just sit there and write them down. They just came flowing out. And he said, the interviewer said, can you still do that? He goes, no. No, he says, that period's past. I'm in a new period now, doing what I do now. But I won't be writing, I was going to say Gone with the Wind, Blowing in the Wind. I won't be writing Blowing in the Wind again, or anything like it, or Tambourine Man.
Wow.
So, but the big thing is procrastination, insecurity. When you think, I don't know as I can do this. Yesterday I really tried, nothing came out. Oh my God, what if it never comes out? Well, someday it might never come out. And that's what happened to Bob Dylan. But, it certainly will go that way if you don't try, if you don't sit down and just, I'm going to write for the next hour. Right here, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to write for the next hour. For me, the big thing, this is like a Cole Porter, there's this great Cole Porter quote. You know, you're pretty young, but you know who Cole Porter is, right? Yeah, okay. So they asked him, what comes first, the words or the music? He says, what comes first is the phone call. And for me, that for many years, that was the impetus. I get a call from a TV network and said, we need a theme song for this newscast, or we need, you know, a promo for this. And they send me the video. Now I have a job. I've taken the job. I've got to do this. There's no, oh gosh, I don't feel creative today. I got to sit down and I got to get this done. In tick-tock, the clock is running. So when the phone call comes in for me, that's when the creativity comes in. It's like there's no choice. I chose to be in this business, so you know.
I've got 3 more questions for you, Jimmy. If you will,
Okay.
if you will entertain
Sure.
them.
Oh yeah.
The first is, what's your number one piece of advice for people who want to compose music or write songs?
I wouldn't do it the way I did it. I never studied classical music. I learned how to become an orchestral scorer by listening to orchestras like I used to listen to Beatles records. And this was advice from a classical composer. He says, look, you're not going to go to Juilliard now. So my advice to you is, you know, you're really good at picking out the instruments and what they do in the Beatles records. He says, just do the same thing with an orchestra. So what I did was I invested a lot of money in orchestral samples so I could hear the sounds of every instrument, English horn, you know, odd instruments, bass flutes, bass clarinets, English horns, which is not an oboe. It's like an oboe, but it's bigger and has a slightly different sound. And I would play these it's called the Vienna Symphonic Library.
Yes.
The Vienna Symphonic Library. And then I had the entire orchestra, and I started listening to them. Then I started writing melodies with them. I said, oh, I see. Now, that instrument I was playing a minute ago, what would that sound? And I put it in there. Oh, yeah. And then I put something, I hate that. You know, and I did it piece by piece by piece, slowly by slowly. Just go to school. You know, go to music school. You get a professor who'll teach you that stuff overnight, and you learn how to read music. If you're going to do orchestral scoring, I recommend being a keyboard player.
Do you think perhaps that because you have a golden set of ears, you have literally platinum ears, as evidenced by what's behind you on the wall? Perhaps because you have these platinum ears, those things innately made sense to you, and also because you were raised by people who are musicians. Do you think perhaps that gave you a foundation that then you did not need to understand those basic things because you understood them just through pattern recognition and exposure?
Yeah, it's really helpful to have ears like that.
Yeah.
It really is. I have worked with one particular guy, really good singer. You know, good emotive singer, Italian guy, and just really fun to work with. We did a duo, just playing clubs and things like that for a while, just for the fun of it. And we would want to do a new song, and we'd put the song up. You know, they were just mostly covers. And I'd listen to it, and I'd just start playing the chords. He says, how did you do that?
Yeah.
I said, how did I do what? He says, how did you know the chords? I said, I just heard them. Didn't you hear them? He goes, no. And I would have to write the chords out for him because he absolutely, for the life of him, could not figure out, you know, there was no connection between his hands and what he was hearing in that sense. You know, he could do trial and error, but he wouldn't know where to start. And each time he plays it wrong, it makes it that much harder to get back on track. For me, I hear something and I immediately know the chords. You know, I can hear something once and just play the chords. And I am not, you know, I'm not the best at this in the world. Ravel was the best at this. Here's a very quick story. A wonderful, wonderful keyboard player told me. He said Tchaikovsky was with his teacher, and he had written one of his amazing pieces, and Ravel popped by. They were kind of in the same period, and his teacher said, "Play the piece for Mr. Ravel." And he plays the piece on the piano, and Ravel goes, "Oh, that's a really good piece of music. I like that." And Tchaikovsky was he said, "What would you know?" And Ravel says, "Well," and he sits down and plays like 40-bar passage that he just heard. He says, well, I particularly like this part when you went and played it like almost note for note. And Tchaikovsky was like, oh my God. Talk about embarrassed. You never know who you're talking to. So, that's another piece of advice. You never know who you're talking to.
Platinum ears.
Until you do, keep your mouth shut. And never be rude. Never say something like that. Come on. Anyway, yeah, Ravel had better ears than me, and probably.
That story also could have received some shine as it passed down through the ages.
I'm sure.
Well,
it puts probably more like 2 bars.
But still, to hear something once and go back and play it is indeed a skill and a testimony of ears. What do you think the number one mistake that you learned to avoid in songwriting has been?
Well, I'll give you a couple. Number one, settling. Writing a lyric that's okay. It needs to be really good. Especially now when there's a million songs out there. And I'm not a huge fan of country music, but those guys come up with some of the best damn lyrics. They really do. That song about you're bashing the headlights in the car and slashing his tires.
Oh, yeah. Next time he'll think before he cheats.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah,
that's such a good song.
Amazing set of lyrics. I mean, that's the best of Nashville coming out. Don't settle. If a line is mediocre, lose it. Don't say, well, it rhymes. It's perfect. I mean, I met you in June. I'm over the moon. No. The other thing is, if you believe a song has legs and you believe it's good, don't give up on it. Work on it. Don't give up so easily. If you want to be a songwriter, if you're just a hobbyist, it doesn't really matter. But if you're really looking to send songs out to publishers and get them cut by Bruce Springsteen or somebody like that, then, do the work. It's just like practicing. You got to put in the time every single day. Then you have momentum. If you want to be a writer, write every day. If you want to be a musician, practice every day. But be consistent. Be consistent, because when you procrastinate, you let time pass, you backslide. I had a situation with the guitar when I had a band called the Hitmen. I think I might have told. Well, you heard about them in the book anyway. And things were going really well. And then COVID came around, and all of our gigs went away. And I'd been doing it for 10 years, so I said, it's time. I don't need to be out on every single weekend getting on a plane. So I decided to write this book. Which one? This one. And during the time that I was writing the book, I didn't pick up a guitar. I had been playing so much guitar for so long, I said, I need to take a break from music. It was like, well, it's actually 64 years now, not 63. That wasn't really smart, because when I came back to the guitar, I had lost so much ground. First of all, I had no calluses on my fingers, so it hurt to play. My dexterity, my coordination, I really had to woodshed to get it back. It's back now, but it took some serious effort to reclaim it. So be consistent, stay with it. If you want to be a successful musician, practice every single day. Every single day. Take a day off now and then, fine. But really be consistent and practice at least an hour. An hour won't kill you, because if you really check your time over a day, you will see so many hours that you waste, looking at Facebook for 3 hours, and Instagram, and just, palm time. Don't take that the wrong way. Palm with a phone in it. You can find an hour. You may not want to. It may be, that day you may just want to not do it. Do it. Force yourself. And once you get started with it, you'll be fine. It'll be good.
Jimmy, thank you for being so generous with your time. Thank you for going long. I asked you for half an hour. You gave me just an hour right now. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come talk with me. Jimmy Ryan, his latest project is a memoir called Behind. It's an autobiography of a musical shapeshifter. It's available everywhere, major booksellers worldwide. See links in the video description if you're on YouTube, or in the show notes if you are on audio. Jimmy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. You have asked some of the most intelligent questions I've ever heard in an interview. Most of these interviews are really just the same kind of, rote questions, and you dig deep. I love that. You're good. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.